Hello, my name is Konstantin, and in this video series I'm going to cover my journey from my childhood to my teenage time and to my adulthood, how I moved from glorifying to despising Russia. If you don't know what's going on here, then I suggest you to watch my previous videos, but in short, I'm just covering my memories and my experience, how I grew up in Ukraine, moved out, what I have learned and what I have experienced. I do not guarantee that everything I say is going to be 100% accurate, but these are my memories and my experience. In this video, I'm going to cover my young adulthood from 17 years of age to somewhere about 22-23 years of age. So when I was 17, I got my first ever job and I was able to earn some money, and with this money I decided to move out from Ukraine because I considered Ukraine to be a red hole where I did not have any friends, did not have any recognition, and did not see any opportunity to move on with my career. By then I spoke English somehow okay, so I could work for foreign companies, for example in United States or in Germany or somewhere else wherever they accept English-speaking people. I also had a few opportunities to go to Slovakia, to Germany or United States, but I decided to go to Russia with future move to China. And I decided that because I had a firm belief that Europe is a rotten hole place where people are not respected, where family is not respected, where everyone is just caring about their own money and everyone would simply run over everyone else for the sake of getting some extra money. The propaganda also convinced me pretty hard that I do not have any rights in Europe or United States because I have to do insurance for everything, I have to pay for everything, I don't have rights to do anything, I am not allowed to buy that, I'm not allowed to buy that, everything has to go against strict rules, and if I do a step to the left or step to the right, then it's going to be a complete failure and I will be fined, I will be arrested, and so on. I actually had a couple of interviews with European and American companies. With some of them I decided not to proceed, some of them decided not to be interested in me because I was too young and too inexperienced, and so I moved to Russia. On the day when I finally got my money, bought my tickets, got my passport and boarded on the train, I felt extremely excited. I felt like finally I'm leaving this red hole and going into a new world with new opportunities. It happened that I shared a coupe in a train car with a Russian family, and I was very negatively surprised how despiseful they treated me. They simply would not talk to me, or when they say something it would be extremely despiseful and they would believe that they are some sort of a superior caste because they are from Moscow and I'm from some sort of a red hole called Ukraine. I don't know what exactly they did in Ukraine, probably they visited some relatives, but their way of talking, their attitude towards me and towards other Ukrainians was extremely bad and negative surprise for me. Of course, eventually I have reached my destination, city Kazan, which is in Tatarstan, and Tatarstan is a republic within Russia. It's actually occupied by Russia right now, but they decide not to fight for their independence. But that's another story. First, I had to pass through Moscow, and in Moscow I have received the worst ever treatment. If in Ukraine I would complain that the customer service or maybe clerks in hotels or in shops are a bit grumpy, then in Moscow I could hear some mean and disgusting comments just for nothing. For example, even though I speak Russian, I don't speak exactly like Russians do, so I have some accent, and sometimes I could use some Ukrainian words when I speak Russian, and especially back then when I just moved from Ukraine and go into a Russian-speaking city, Moscow, I could use a lot of Ukrainian words, and just for that people would hate me, people would poke on me, and sometimes they would even refuse to sell me some stuff when I wanted to buy it and I didn't know how to call it in Russian. So I pointed at that and said it in Ukrainian, but they would just look at me and ask, "Are you from Ukraine, right?" and would not sell it to me until I remember how to say it in Russian. So, of course, I was disgusted with it and it discouraged me a lot, but after all, I reached my destination, Kazan city. It's somewhere in the middle of Russia, and there we have, or they have, lots of native Tatar population. Those natives are usually speaking two languages at least, so one is their local Tatar language and the other one is of course Russian. So these natives, they never mistreated me and they would never say anything mean about me. They are like, "Oh, are you from Ukraine? That's totally fine." Sure, once I landed there, I had to find a job, and the job seeking experience was also a little bit of a roller coaster. Finally, I got two options where I could go for work, and the first one was a small company owned by a Russian guy, and I actually came there to work for a few days. And the attitude from this Russian guy towards me was completely disgusting. Like, he would not give a shit about me, he would say mean comments towards me, and he made me understand that he only wants me to make money for him, and if I fail to do that, he will just throw me out like complete trash. The other company was led by a Tatar guy, and there I received much better treatment and much better reception. The colleagues, many of them were also Tatarian, and I had a great time there. I don't have much to complain about that time. I had very good working relationships. Sometimes I would fail, but they would encourage me and help me. After all, I was just 17, 18 years of age and basically no experience, and they were all about 25, 35, some of them were even 45. So it was a great experience, and I felt happy that I stayed with people from this local republic, Tatar people, and not Russians. Another thing I had to experience is Russian bureaucracy. So when I was in Ukraine, I felt like I have to do this paper, I have to do that paper, and no one helps me. And sometimes they are when working against me just for the sake of torturing people. They would close down 5 minutes earlier or refuse to give a paper if there is a small mark in the form where you're filling up, just to torture people. And these were like this old grumpy woman from Soviet Union that felt that they are in power to torture other people because other people who are coming to get documents can do nothing about it. So I thought that once I move to Moscow, once I move to Russia, it will be all structured, all will be perfect. And of course I studied all the laws and all the regulations of what I as a Ukrainian obliged to do and apply for if I move to Russia. So there is such a thing as a registration of your living place in Russia. And according to the Russian law, or at least according to the Russian law back then, this registration is required for the landlord. So if a landlord is renting out their apartment or their house to a foreigner, they must go to the police station and report, there is a foreigner with this name and last name lives in my apartment by this address. So I thought, perfect, I don't need to do anything. This is required for the landlord, and landlord will do everything for me. And in the law itself, it is written that landlord is obliged to do that. It is not saying that the tenant or the one who moves in is supposed to do that. But once I moved in, I started to talk to people who also moved in, and turns out that it's totally the opposite. They give no shit about what is written in the law, but if a policeman stops you without this registration paper, they would first take you to the police station. They would keep you there for about 2-3 days and declare that they are trying to identify you. Even if you have your documents, they will try to identify when you moved in, where you stayed, and so on. And eventually they will let you go when you pay them some significant amount of money. So I thought this is completely ridiculous. I could not believe it. I thought I just moved away from this crap, and now I'm in Russia where everything's supposed to work, where the system's supposed to work. But yeah, the system worked, but it worked in a completely opposite way to what I expected. I talked to my landlord and wanted to make this registration to avoid this problem, and I told my landlord that according to the Russian law, they are obliged to go to the police station and make this registration. Yet the landlord just blindly said to me, no, police is never going to ask me for this paper, police is going to ask you for this paper, and if you want this paper, figure out how to do it. I don't give a shit. Eventually, I had to move to another place where a landlord would agree to make me this paper, but this was a very unpleasant experience because I tried to do everything according to the law. I tried to follow the letter of the law, and nothing worked. They just treated me like complete garbage, complete shit. Also, according to the law back then, as a Ukrainian, I could stay in Russia for just 3 months straight. Then I have to leave and go back. And I lived close to Kazakhstan border, so basically every 3 months I would go to the Kazakhstan border, pass the border, and then go back to Russia. And this all been done only for the sake of collecting extra money. Because on the border, the police officer would stand there and just check your documents, check and check and check and check, and everything is totally right. If they find something wrong, they would nitpick on it and say that, okay, you have two options. Either The option number one, you pay me this amount of money right now. The option number two, we take you to the police station, which is back into the city, and we try to identify your identity, figure out what's going on, why your documents are wrong, and if we don't find anything criminal, we let you go. So you pick what option you want. And once it happened to me that I had my documents in a perfect shape, I had everything filled up correctly, and I go through the border, and the police officer is just sliding my documents, looking at it, and sighing and saying to me, "Look, I know that your documents are totally fine, but we're standing here. It's cold here. Don't you think you need to leave or something for hot tea?" Sure, I had no other option but give him I think it was about 50 euros or 50 US dollars in Russian currency to just pass through the border with my documents in a completely correct shape. Once I was unlucky enough and was not able to make this registration paper in time, because you have to make it within 3 days after you enter Russia, and I failed to do it because I went to the police station and they had so long line that they physically would not be able to process all these people. But instead of opening other windows where other police officers could help these people get their papers, they kept only one window out of 5 windows. And of course, many people would miss the opportunity to make this paper, and then the next day I'm coming, which is already 4th day, so I'm considered as a violator and trying to make this paper, and the police officer is looking at me and asking, why did you not make this registration paper in time? And I said, okay, look, I am coming from Kazakhstan. It takes me 1 day to come from the Kazakhstan to the city where I'm staying. For the next day when I came, it was a weekend, so I cannot make a paper. And for the 3rd day, I'm coming to the police station and here is a huge line, so I missed the time. I'm really sorry about it. And then he's looking at me and like, yeah, so now you're a violator. He's taking my passport and saying, now, right here, I'm going to write that you are a violator of Russian law. So next time we know what to look for. I was very confused. I thought that people are supposed to understand each other. I perfectly described the situation, why I have missed this time. So I said, okay, please, if you need to write these into my documents, can you please write it into another passport? So I had 2 passports. One was old enough, so it would be expiring soon, and the other one was new one that would still be valid for next 5 or 10 years, I don't remember. And when I said that, he just jumped on his seat and screamed at me, "I am here the boss. I am deciding what and where to write. You just stay shut, you understand?" And then he adds some dirty words. Of course, I did not have any other option than just saying, "Yes, sir." After a while, he just swapped my documents, and then I don't know what happened with him, but he just stamped my documents that everything is all right and sent me to pay a fine in form of I think it was somewhere about 300 euros or 300 US dollars for this 1 day missed registration form. All in all, that time I stayed in Russia for a bit less than a year, and after that I moved to China. China is another story and I will cover it in another video, but my stay in Russia at that time was deeply unpleasant. Eventually I found a nice apartment to stay and I had okay relationship with the landlord, but it still was not a pleasant experience, because if I would go to a store in the evening when Russians can hear that I speak with Ukrainian accent, this would mean that I'm searching for troubles. That's why I try to avoid any visits to stores in the evening. I try to avoid places where there are no lights. I try to avoid places with a no dense population, so there would always be some people around. So if something happens, people would either see it or at least try to help me. After a while, I just stopped talking Russian to strangers and tried to speak English, and that was a bit safer. Back then, they would not dare to rob a foreigner because that would be considered a bigger crime and police would be really on them, but still, it was not a pleasant experience. Once on my way home, I got stopped by a bunch of dudes. They wanted my wallet and my phone, but I talked to them in English and they simply didn't understand what I said, and they didn't understand what to do. So they started to talk to each other and figure out what to do. And while they talked to each other, I just went away and then started to hear some dirty words in English and Russian into my back once I already left. So the experience was deeply unpleasant, even though some moments were okay and my relationship with colleagues also been pretty okay. With this, I think it's enough for the video. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.